Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are going to decode a truly bizarre digital feud, and we're doing it by exploring the fascinating, absolutely terrifying biological mechanisms of the zombie ant fungus. Then, we're going to take those exact mechanisms and map them right onto the geopolitical history of the British Empire. I know, it sounds like a wild combination, but stick with me because the connections here are going to totally blow your mind. All right, let's just jump right in. This completely jarring, explosive comment is exactly how a systems architect responded to a pretty standard run-of-the-mill 48-hour YouTube copyright strike from a sci-fi critic. It's a totally unhinged response to a mundane legal threat, right? Well, instead of just clicking fair use or letting the video get taken down, Kyle MacLean-Smith, the architect, escalated the simple digital clash with British critic Damien Walter into a massive, sweeping claim about international espionage and national sovereignty. He didn't just push back, he essentially accused the critic of acting as a literal intelligence operative. Section 1. The Digital Proxy War. To figure out why a simple copyright threat triggered a full-blown revolutionary war response, we have to look at the vastly different systems these two men represent. We're basically looking at a fundamental clash of worldviews here. On one side, we have Kyle MacLean-Smith, who is a systems architect building decentralized, transparent code, things like SeedReDB, designed from the ground up to let users control their own data. On the other side, we have Damien Walter. He's a British sci-fi critic and a former Special Forces librarian who relies on institutional storytelling and media critique. So you've got decentralized code built from the bottom up, going head-to-head with centralized institutional narratives dictated from the top down. When pushed on his extreme reaction, Smith dropped this quote. He isn't just throwing random insults here, he is meticulously mapping this legal threat directly onto a very specific worldview, one where the American Republic is literally being hijacked by an external parasitic power. He actually views institutional players as foreign entities who are weaponizing legal frameworks to capture American sovereignty. That takes us right into Section 2, the parasitic framework. Because to truly grasp Smith's geopolitical metaphor, we really need to look at one of the most terrifying hijackers in the natural world. Enter Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but you probably just know it as the zombie ant fungus. This pathogen, which heavily targets specific species like carpenter ants, provides a perfect, almost mechanical blueprint for understanding how an external force can systematically infiltrate and exploit a sovereign host. So here's how this nightmare actually works, and what's wild is how perfectly these biological stages mirror Smith's claims of systemic foreign capture. It starts super quietly. A spore literally drills through the ant's exoskeleton using enzymes. Once it's inside, it grows as free-living yeast cells that secrete nerve toxins, which physically control the ant's peripheral muscles. The ant is then forced to leave its colony, made to bite down on a leaf in a permanent death grip, and finally, and this is the gross part, the fungus consumes the ant's internal organs so it can sprout a stalk right out of its neck. It is a hostile takeover of the highest order. Okay, let's tie these threads together. If you think of a sovereign nation as an ant colony, the historical operations of the British Empire operated an awful lot like Ophiocordyceps. The East India Company arrived quietly, just like those spores, initially presenting themselves as peaceful traders. The fungus secretes toxins to disrupt the ant's communication. The empire used a divide-and-rule strategy to fracture local populations. The fungus forces the ant into a microclimate suitable for its own growth, while the empire forcibly re-engineered local economies to produce hyperspecific cash crops. And ultimately, both scenarios end in the total systematic extraction of the host's resources. Section 3. Bypassing the brain. This is where a crucial aspect of this parasitic takeover makes both the biological and historical examples so incredibly effective. So, researchers at Penn State actually used AI to analyze thousands of microscopic slices of these infected ants, and they discovered something absolutely mind-bending. The fungus never actually penetrates the ant's brain. It leaves the brain completely intact. Instead, it builds this complex 3D network entirely within the muscle fibers. It controls the host peripherally, basically turning the ant into a helpless prisoner trapped inside its own functionally moving body. And you know, this brilliantly illustrates the British Empire's infamous tactic of indirect rule. Rather than always installing their own governors, the British often just left local leaders, like Maharajas in India or kings in Nigeria, sitting right on their thrones. They left the brain of the nation intact, offering up this total illusion of autonomy, while they completely took over the muscles, meaning the region's economic and military infrastructure. And it gets crazier. Research shows the fungus actually uses light influence to navigate its host. It forces the ant to climb to a hyper-specific height, usually around 25 centimeters off the ground in certain tropical forests, because that exact elevation provides the perfect temperature and humidity for the fungus to reproduce. Just as the British Empire forced nations to abandon self-sustaining agriculture to grow very specific cash crops for global trade, the parasite physically forces the host into an environment that solely serves the invader's needs. Section 4. The death grip. Because eventually, the illusion of autonomy has to end, and both the biological and the imperial parasite must secure their ultimate goal. Biologists literally call this the death grip. When the ant reaches that perfect height, the fungus severs the Z-lines in the ant's muscle fibers. This ensures the ant's jaw locks permanently onto a leaf vein. It literally cannot let go even if it wanted to. This is the exact moment the ant ceases to be an individual entirely and just becomes a platform for the parasite. And historical analysts point out that the empire totally knew what it was doing during its own death grip phases. Historian Kylie Wilkinson notes that British officials often recognized their own parasitic, exploitative presence. They lived under this constant paranoid fear of rebellion from the host nation, completely aware that they were draining the wealth and life out of the local population for their own gain. Section 5. A fungus in America's clothing. Now, let's connect these fascinating historical and biological blueprints all the way back to our two internet combatants and see why this matters to the digital age. David Hughes, who is the lead researcher on that zombie ant study at Penn State, summarized his findings with this amazing quote. In essence, these manipulated animals were a fungus in ants' clothing, and that perfectly encapsulates Kyle McLean Smith's worldview. When Smith looks at tech elites or institutional critics who wield copyright threats, he doesn't see independent American actors. He sees a fungus in America's clothing. Smith's whole argument is that our modern digital infrastructure is compromised. He points to billionaires like Peter Thiel, who publicly fears a totalitarian state while simultaneously building Palantir, which is the exact global surveillance architecture such a state would need. He also points to tech elites actively funding transhumanism. For Smith, these elites and media critics are operating under an overarching imperial logic. They're acting as the modern East India Company, using legal threats and institutional storytelling to suppress decentralized thought and extract our data. And here is where our two digital combatants completely diverge, even though they're staring at the exact same problem. Both men agree that invisible, massive systems of power are a huge threat to human liberty, but their diagnosis is totally different. Walter believes this is an internal, capitalist evolution, tech elites building a dystopian tech feudalism to cheat their own mortality. Smith, on the other hand, believes it's an external parasitic infection, an imperial system bypassing our democratic brain to control our societal muscles. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. As we keep building our digital empires, and as algorithmic control dictates more and more of our behavior, our economy, and our media, are we truly acting on our own autonomy? Or, just like the carpenter ant, has the parasite already bypassed the brain? Think about that the next time you encounter a system telling you exactly where to go and what to do.